So with our recent Borderlands 4 showcase, we learned a lot of information on how the weapons system is going to work and what rarities we can expect, at least on launch of Borderlands 4. But I do think there is very much room for another rarity above what we have gotten revealed so far. And there's two main pieces of information you need to know before we go over what my theory could be for a higher rarity than what we've gotten revealed. First off is the new weapon parts system. So in Borderlands 4, we're going to have 8 weapon manufacturers on launch. So any weapon you get, the kind of main bulk or base of the weapon is going to be one of those 8 manufacturers, but then you have the licensed parts system. So any of those weapons that are of those 8 manufacturers that drop can randomly roll any other manufacturer parts, even for manufacturers that aren't a part of those 8. So they shut off like a legendary Vladoff weapon that had a Hyperion shield on it, and Hyperion isn't even one of the main manufacturers. It had a Maliwan switch on it, so you can switch between multiple elements, and it had a Torg magazine on it, meaning it shoots out explosives or stickies. And that's just like one of the very many possible rolls of that, say, one weapon. So in Borderlands 4, you could very easily have 4 of the same legendary weapon equipped, and each one of those legendaries of the same legendary, the same name, would perform completely differently. You could get a throw to reload Tediore weapon that when you throw it, it becomes a weapon with legs that has a Maliwan switch on it, so you could switch elements on it. Maybe you could have Torg on that as well. So now your thrown weapon with legs is shooting elemental explosives on enemies. You could have a Vladoff weapon with Torg stickies to have a really large magazine. Maybe it has a Ripper component on it, so it's fully automatic Torg stickies with high magazines. There's a ridiculous amount of possibilities with this system. So this weapon part system is part one, but the second part is that the developers did kind of announce that legendaries are the highest rarity of weapons or items we're going to be getting at the launch of Borderlands 4. Now they could just be trying to hide another higher rarity, but with them basically announcing that in the first showcase, it seems like on launch, we're just going up to legendary like we had in Borderlands 3. But this is also quite a bit different than Borderlands 3 because you didn't have this type of weapon part system. So even though we're only going up to legendary, getting the legendary role you want could potentially be much harder than getting the legendary role you wanted in Borderlands 3. But because of the new weapons part system and because we're seemingly not getting above legendary on launch, this leaves room for a new type of higher rarity coming after launch that I think there's some really cool possibilities for. So I have 2 different ideas that I think could both fit into a rarity above legendaries, and I think it would make sense for this to be called pearlescent, because if you go back to Borderlands games that actually had pearlescence, a lot of the pearlescents weren't actually good, and they didn't really play that big of a different role compared to legendaries. Like if you just made them less rare and turned them into legendaries, pretty much nobody would have thought of these being as a different rarity because they kind of just shared the same thing. They were just rare, and realistically most of them weren't even better than legendaries anyway. If we went into Borderlands 4 and added pearlescence on top of legendaries, there's a few different things we could do with them. First off is have them be a curated role. Now both these things I'm going to be going over do have counterparts in Destiny 2, which I think is just the most apt comparison because Destiny 2 obviously is inspired from Borderlands, as Borderlands was the first looter shooter. A lot of other RPGs and even ARPGs have done systems like this. It's just a really apt comparison to go to Destiny 2. Now, curated roles in Destiny 2 are essentially a pre-rolled version of a weapon. So let's say you'd have the legendary weapons of Borderlands 2, where you could have random perk rolls on them that you could switch between, or just random perk rolls on a weapon. Then you could get a curated role of that weapon where the weapon's fully upgraded, but has all preset perks that are basically developer chosen. So if you ever got the curated role of a specific weapon, it would always be the exact same role and always be set on those roles. Now, in Destiny 2, they're not necessarily more rare. I think they're a bit more rare than just like random rolled versions of the weapon, but they're not like crazy rare. In Borderlands 4, a curated role would be a pearlescent version of a legendary weapon, just much rarer with specific weapon parts as its role. So in Borderlands 4, you could get a legendary and it could roll a bunch of random parts on it, but if you got the pearlescent of that legendary, it would be that curated role with these specific parts on it being like a named pearlescent of a legendary. But that's only part one of what would make these pearlescents an actual pearlescent, because you would still be able to get legendary rolls with basically the same parts, and it'd still be the legendary version. But Destiny 2 also has something that's a newer addition to the game, but they're called Shinies. Essentially, you can very rarely get a different version of the same weapon that has a different look to it. And in Destiny, these Shinies are specifically like really cool animated effects on the weapon. And I don't remember if every time they had like more perks to choose between, but I think the main thing that would translate over to Borderlands would have a unique effect, maybe its own unique animated effect for every single one of the pearlescents. So you would get this curated pearlescent roll that's a curated roll of a specific legendary, but then would have its own unique look on it, hopefully its own unique animated look on it. So I do think having this higher rarity above legendaries, but being a just higher rarity version of the legendaries with these curated rolls, meaning if you get that pearlescent, it always has the same rolls and then also has this really cool animated effect on it, would actually be a really cool spot for another rarity above legendaries that doesn't invalidate that legendary, but also still gives you something to go chase. Because I'm still somebody that's wanted pearlescents in Borderlands games. I want them in Borderlands 4, but realistically, when you go and look back at pearlescents in previous Borderlands games, you were essentially just farming them just to farm a pearlescent. Like a couple of them were good, but most of them weren't even as good as some of the better legendaries. So they really didn't even have a reason to be there. And they especially didn't have a reason to be that super rare. But if you had something like this, there would be a reason for it to be that super rare. And obviously the developers would have to do a good job of making those curated rolls actually good. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to be the best rolled version of that legendary, the best possible, but just have a pretty good one, maybe at like the 95 percentile or something like that. And it would generally be really cool. It would allow them to be super rare. Then you get the cool animated effect on them as well. And even though this higher rarity would ideally be much more rare, obviously being the curator rolls and having the really cool effect on it, you would want it to be much more rare as more of a chase item. Could also help you have a bit of an easier time farming for a specific role you want. Like if that pearlescent of that legendary had a really good role, the role you're looking for, that could at least be something that may be easier to obtain than trying to just refarm the legendary over and over and over again and trying to randomly get the correct role you want. So it could help with that a little bit, but we also don't know what other game features or even endgame features that there are going to be in Borderlands 4. There could be some endgame feature that allows us to change out certain weapon parts or allows us to farm some currency to change out weapon parts or something like that. There could be some other systems in the game that allows us to either target farm things easier or change out weapon parts, but I don't think even if that's in the game that would invalidate this potential of this pearlescent rarity, because you would still have the curator role, meaning there's still other roles to go for, and you would still have that really cool animated effect, which I think is something in Borderlands that hasn't been used enough. Different looks of things. We've obviously gotten more skins with Borderlands 3 to change the look of weapons. We've gotten more skins for our characters that people obviously like to change a lot, but I think tying some more looks, some more cosmetics into gear chases into the game would actually be really good when tied in with the other elements that I've gone over. So let me know what you guys think about this possibility for pearlescents. I think this would be a really cool addition sometime in Borderlands 4 as another higher rarity, especially with the cosmetic aspect of maybe getting a cool animated version of a weapon. I think could work really well in Borderlands. It's something they haven't done a ton before, but that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.